Let's get started. Senator Ben Allen, round of applause, please. You hear a lot about politicians. This guy is the best. I've known him forever, and he's not a traditional politician of whatever you see on the news. He's an incredible thinker. He is a brilliant man and a friend, and I'm honored to have him sit here with me today. And let's get started. It would be remiss if we didn't just say something about the fires, right? So how is that, you manage this district that experienced the most difficult portion of this catastrophe. What does your day-to-day look like now? What are some of the challenges and opportunities, and what's in your power to do about it?
So good morning, everybody. So great to see everyone. It's a great turnout, and I appreciate it very much. I represent a state senate district. Our districts are about 1 million people apiece. It's enormous. But my district includes the entire Palisades fire. It also goes all the way out to Hollywood, the whole coastal South Bay. So it's a lot of different communities, from Palos Verdes all the way up to Calabasas, all the way out to the Hollywood Bowl, and certainly this wonderful community here in Venice. What a difficult few weeks it's been. This beautiful community that I know well. We've been members of the Kehillat Israel Synagogue for a long time up there. I grew up in Santa Monica, so we're kind of sister communities. So many of my friends from there, and just to have the whole community burn down to a crisp right in front of our eyes. I've been up in the zone a number of times. Now, of course, we've moved from shock to anger. I think people are very upset, justifiably, about losing their homes, losing their community. It's been immensely difficult, and there's now this incredibly challenging process involved with the cleaning of it all and the rebuilding, and there's so many factors to this. And part of the challenge is that everybody's flying a little blind. I think people want to think the government knows exactly what it's doing, and I think anyone who's worked close to government knows it's just a bunch of people trying their best for the most part. And yes, we have federal support, who go from disaster to disaster, and that's immensely helpful. Quite frankly, I can't imagine that the president would consider disbanding FEMA, given their immense experience. But having their help is really helpful, because they go from disaster to disaster. Most of us have never experienced a disaster. Most people have never built a home, right? I mean, most people, you buy a home, you rent a home, you don't build a home. If you have built a home, you've never built on a toxic fire site, and with all the challenges associated with that. And yet we're asking this entire community, 2 major communities in the LA area, with all of the challenges and the tariffs and the supply chain issues and labor shortages and immigration deportations, to rebuild 2 massive communities in a matter of months that have just been flattened, that are filled with toxic ash. And so it's really hard. It's hard. I love hard work. What makes this one hard also is just the human tragedy behind it all. I mean, having to look people in the eye who've lost everything. Some people have lost friends. They've lost their lives. And so much of our work right now is just focused on support. How do we help people hook up with insurance? How do we get them the information they need? How do we get them back to their sites? But if they're going back to the sites, how do we make sure that they're going to be protecting themselves? Because it is dangerous to go back. How do we get the schools reopened? How do we get the kids, from one side of the community to the other? And it's working with law enforcement and the fire and the insurance commissioner, and the water has been contaminated. And how do we, get people fresh water that's going to be clean? How do we deal with the fact that you've got, people who lost their homes, and there's people in the same zone who didn't lose their homes, and yet it's still pretty uninhabitable? There's the utilities. So there's just many layers to this work. And it also, of course, involves a lot of different layers of government. And I think we're also seeing some of the dysfunction, quite frankly, of LA governance. Who's in charge, right? Is it the mayor? Is it the county supervisor? Is it the Congress? Is it FEMA? Is it the state legislature, the governor, the city council member? It's interesting talking to my colleagues who are state senators in other parts of the state. When they walk in the room, they're the big cheese, because their counties are 100,000 people live in the county. They represent 1 million people. But when I walk into the room as representing 1 million people, the mayor's got 3.5 million constituents. The supervisor's got 2 million constituents. The congressman's got a similar. So there's all these cooks in the kitchen, and different skills and different interests and different focus. And so that's a whole nother layer of challenge too. And my job, I see my job, quite frankly, as supporting their efforts, giving whatever support we can from the state, advocating for the community, trying to get resources. We've just got a major package of funding through from the state, and then just pushing the state agencies to provide whatever help they can to the locals and the feds that are doing the bulk of the on-the-ground work of the cleanup and recovery.
Yeah, it just, when we talk about levels of government, does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Does everyone think they know all the levels of government? Okay. Does anyone know what a county supervisor is? Yeah. Do you know what they do? No. You know the difference between a state senator and a federal senator? Yes. All right, good. Good.
There's a couple no's.
There's a couple that, yeah. No, look, there's something like 20%, some studies say 20% of people understand civics in general, and even less get involved in it. But just for another matter of fact, is anyone here involved in civically active businesses? Raise your hands. Okay. Anyone using AI or any of the emerging technologies right now as part of their business? Got it. Anyone use AI in general?
Can't help it.
I'm sorry. Civics is different. Civics is your responsibility as a person versus getting involved in working for the government or necessarily being a politician. Civics is the understanding of government and what's required there. But can you explain a little bit, Ben, about the levels of government and why it's so important to understand and how that can impact people in terms of getting involved?
It's funny, Americans love decentralization. And, right, and yet we also want the government to function decisively when we need it, and those two are very they're in discord. They're in discord. So we've got all these levels of government, right? You were on a neighborhood council. That's a very micro experience, right? It's literally the people in the neighborhood who get together and elect a neighborhood council that advocates for the neighborhood. You have a city council and a city government with the mayor in charge who oversees the city. Above that, you've got the county government with a 5-member board of supervisors. No elected executive. That's changing, by the way. We just all voted to create a new elected executive for the county, which I think is a good thing, quite frankly, because I think it's going to create some locus of responsibility and accountability. Above that, you've got the state government with a legislature that mirrors Congress, an assembly and a Senate, and a governor. And then, of course, there's the federal government with the House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, and then the president. And each of these layers of government take care of various aspects of life. And it's amazing how complicated it can get. I interned when I was in college for the county supervisor, Zev Yaroslavsky at the time. And I sat in the front, and I would just be listening to all the folks handling the calls that were coming in. And half the time the call was, "Oh, thank you. That's a city problem. Let me send you over to the council member. Oh, that's a state problem. Let me send you to the state legislator. That's a federal problem." And these people got so good at knowing, who to direct people to. But it's ridiculous, right? We ask people to have to understand civics just to get basic services from their government. And I will say, part of our responsibility as elected officials, and we all have staff, is to really get to know everybody we work with at every level of government, so we can work more seamlessly together. But what ends up happening? Politicians, sometimes they've got egos, they're competitive. Sometimes people don't work well together. I'm really blessed to have a group of local electeds and right up and down the chain where we've got good working relationships. But some of my colleagues have terrible relationships with some of their politicians, and that can get really in the way of their constituent service work as well. So it's not necessary to know every detail of every institution, but it is important. I think when people wonder sometimes why the messaging can get a little jumbled, it's because you do have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And there's beauty to the system, right? We do try to decentralize because we're not a monarchy. We don't like centralizing power. We don't like handing everything over to one person. But that does sometimes lead to a messiness.
Yeah. What would you say to entrepreneurs either looking to help, I guess in a few ways, either help during catastrophes like this and be supportive and create things that can really be valuable for prevention mechanisms or even to help now. But also, in addition to that, where are the opportunities in general in government to either get funding or create the sort of public-private partnerships that can let them work to achieve California's goals?
Yeah. So I think one of the great things, entrepreneurs are always good at thinking about 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps ahead. Right after the fire, we had so many people give blankets and clothes and food and water. We couldn't handle it all. So that was the obvious stuff. People wanted to help in a way that was obvious to them. But what they didn't always think of was what are people going to need next week, or what are the other things that aren't immediately obvious. I'll give you one little example. There was a synagogue in West LA that called up the synagogue in Palisades and said, "Hey, what can we do to help you?" And of course, the people in the Palisades said, "I'll call you back." I mean, they literally lost their homes. They lost everything. They were in no place to think about what they even needed. And then the synagogue in West LA then called them back and said, "You know what? Check it out. You guys are going to come to our synagogue on Friday night. We're going to give you our sanctuary. We're going to have a toy drive for your kids, and we're going to give you food and clothing and for your families that have lost their homes. And you're going to take over the synagogue, and have a ceremony, a celebration of healing." Hundreds of people showed up. These are people who had been every single person from the synagogue had been displaced. I mean, if they hadn't lost their homes, they were evacuated at least. These are people that wouldn't necessarily normally go. These are people that wouldn't necessarily normally call up for mental health, but when they got the email, they came because they desperately wanted a sense of community, and they wanted a place of healing. And I just bring that up to make the point that the folks at this place in West LA understood what the people in the Palisades needed more than even they did at the time, because they were in such shock. So, I think proactively about the kinds of needs that are going to be in this community. This is a community that was vibrant and living and engaging, and now it's literally they can't. The people are still there. Thankfully, we did lose some people, but the casualties were actually pretty low given the amount of destruction. But the community itself is now dispersed. Lots of people living in our midst, right? I mean, I met someone whose sister is living with him, displaced right here in Venice. So they've got to re-enroll their kids in schools. They're trying to figure out what their next steps are. They need to. Their home offices have burned down. They're missing their documents. So what kinds of support can we give them? When they've lost the home office, when they've lost a lot of their documents, so from a business to business perspective, I think there's ways you guys can be proactive. When it comes to helping the government, I will say, and I know you've experienced this too, it can be sometimes a little frustrating because the government's bureaucratic. The government has a way of doing things. The procurement processes are difficult. And sometimes I've had a lot of entrepreneurs, even in the last couple of weeks, say, "Hey, I've got this great product. It's going to solve the problem. We're going to get water to the..." And hey, just get me in front of a couple of people. And it's hard for them to break through. They've got some product that they think solves the problem. Sometimes there's already a solution that they're not aware of. And sometimes it just doesn't fit neatly into the way that the bureaucrats that are handling the recovery think. And so I just encourage you to be creative. Don't be discouraged when you have trouble getting through. Be willing to modify your message and your product and actually listen closely. Don't just come with a solution that you've already figured out without listening to the people you're trying to pitch it to, because you're going to have to modify your product in a way that's going to meet their needs. And it's hard sometimes to get in if you're an entrepreneur, you do not have the mind of a bureaucrat. And if you're a bureaucrat, you do not have the mind of an entrepreneur. You are separate types of people. And you're beautiful people, and you both add a lot to our society, and we need you to work together. But you're like oil and water in a lot of ways, oil and vinegar. They blend nicely, actually. But, and so just... honestly, we can help you. We can help you translate between those two worlds, because politicians are kind of we have one fit. We have to be entrepreneurial. It's part of, you got to put yourself forward and run for office and pitch yourself and be risk taking. And bureaucrats aren't like that. But we also work within the bureaucracy, and we know the massive systemic challenges that they're trying to solve. And so I would just encourage you to be creative, but also put your mind in the systems thinking of someone who's trying to run a massive undertaking, cleaning up and rebuilding the Palisades, and understand that whatever product you're bringing to them doesn't necessarily fit into the way they're thinking about it. That doesn't mean that you can't figure out a way to incorporate it, but you've got to really use all your creativity and people skills to figure out how to do it. And of course, there's also going to be a lot of personal actors in all of this, individuals that are going to be stepping up to help the community, whether the government likes it or not. And there's ways to kind of insert yourself. But I just encourage a lot of creativity and trying to get your head into the mind of the challenges of the government in order to help the government.
Do you think that some of those challenges, how does California recognizes some of those challenges? A lot of regulatory, it could be bureaucracy. What does California think in general, California, the state of California, how would you say it responds to knowing that those things exist for entrepreneurs? And where does it sit on that? Is it trying to make it easier? Is it trying to make it better? How is it engaging the entrepreneurial solution problem-solving mindset into the ways that, engineers and entrepreneurs, it's a different, like you said, they solve problems differently,
Right. Remember that the government is not some coherent blob that's ready to always roll in a predictable way. Right? It really is a reflection of the wild diversity that is our society. And so many different people in government come with different perspectives and different priorities. Certainly, there is a lot of pride in California's entrepreneurial leadership and a lot of interest in focusing on California's entrepreneurial leadership. And I think you see that right up to the governor. I mean, he himself was an entrepreneur. He's close to the tech sector, particularly in San Francisco. You can see how much he wants to help grow the sector. And you see a lot of individuals that are very interested. You also have other individuals that are pushing other agendas. Labor rights, environmental protections, safety. There may be special interest groups that are trying to push, for their particular solution, or try to protect their piece of the puzzle. The realtors are an incredibly powerful block up in Sacramento. I mean, one of the interesting things about being up there is you just get a window into this incredible range of special interest groups that have built a niche for themselves. And part of what they're trying to do, quite frankly, is to protect their prerogatives. There's a tied house rules. I mean, there's things I never knew about before I got up there. But you can't sell if you're a distiller, a whiskey distiller, you can't sell directly to a consumer. You have to go through a distributor. You can do it directly at a very limited level at the distillery, but you can't just start shipping on your own to the general public, because there's these people right in the middle called the distributors who have created a niche for themselves, and they protect it like the devil. You've got all these different groups out there that are fighting each other. The cosmetic surgeons are fighting against the plastic surgeons. I didn't even know there was a difference between them until I got up there, but it turns out there is, and they hate each other. The podiatrists want to work further up the leg. There's the leg people like, no, you stay to the foot. You got the nurses fighting against the doctors, fighting against the hospitals, fighting against the insurance industry, fighting against the pharmaceuticals, but they all lock arms against the trial lawyers, right? So there's just this kind of massive mix of battle. And it's ridiculous sometimes that it's the legislature that has to cast judgment, but we don't have a better place to do it. But then it becomes also about power and persuasion and relationships and who gets in with the hey, are you going to be with us? We're the docs. You got to stand with us against these other guys. And that's a lot. That's a lot of what ends up happening up in Sacramento is these kind of power battles that are beyond what most people are thinking about. Certainly not these. These are not things that motivated me to run for office when I was putting my name forward. So I would encourage you to just be aware of all that happening. I think a lot of entrepreneurs oftentimes get kind of lost in the shuffle because you guys are so busy doing your work, and it's usually the more established folks that once they're kind of established as a bigger business that then join the chambers and join the organizations that are out there advocating for whatever cause. Tech has a strong voice in Sacramento, but it's dominated by the big guys. Right? It's dominated by Google and Facebook, those guys, right? So I think that one of the things I'm constantly trying to do in my job is say, who's not at the table, who's important to our state that's too busy actually doing the work than to be up here in Sacramento in my face asking for a special carve out. And so I would just say, I guess what I would say is I love the fact that everyone's here trying to learn a little bit about our system, because as they say in Sacramento, if you're not if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And the government is not going away. They will not leave you alone, right? Because there's always someone out there that is going to find something about your business model they're going to want to regulate. Some other group, some other person that sees a threat or an opportunity. And I just encourage you, for the sake of your career, to not ignore politics and government. As much as, focus on your work, focus on your product. Of course, that's got to be your number one. But don't ignore what's happening in the political realm. Because, the political realm has a lot of power over the work you do, ultimately. And we need the voices of entrepreneurs up in Sacramento more than ever. We rely on your creativity. We rely on you staying here and building businesses here and hiring people here. And that's an important part of what makes California great. We know that our state is expensive. We know the costs are high. We know we've got a lot of regulation. And so we really rely on, we also know we're never going to compete in pencil manufacturing or kind of, lower level tic-tac stuff. We're going to rely on the brain-driven products that you're working on biotech, on the stuff coming out of our universities. Those are the kind of things that are going to keep California competitive in the long term. Most politicians know this, and they want to help, but they're also oftentimes flooded with messaging from folks that have just built their entire business model around influencing the government. And you're justifiably not doing that. You're actually working on products, right? You're actually working on things that are going to help people, but incorporate a political and government strategy in your long-term thinking. I can't encourage that enough.
Awesome. Yeah, you brought up a key word there also, biotech. Biotech is one of many emerging technologies, revolutionary technologies, revolutionizing technologies that are emerging right now. AI, robotics, quantum computing, nuclear energy, biotech, things that are, we've never in humanity, you can only handle one at a time usually. We're about to handle like 10 at a time, and that's kind of the singularity as well, right?
And the good news for you is the government can't even think about these issues fast enough to regulate them. Now, there's downsides to that, by the way, because it leads to abuse. But there actually is so much opportunity for innovation here. And the more you can kind of establish your value added before the government gets around to figuring out what to do with you, the better for you.
Where is California positioning itself right now in terms of these advancements, and where do you see relate that to the entrepreneurial world in terms of getting involved and creating meaningful impact and so forth? Yeah,
I mean, I think as I say, we really pride ourselves on being an innovation hub. We pride ourselves on being the center of the tech industry, the heart of Hollywood, the heart of so many biosciences. We've invested, quite frankly. I mean, so much of the investment we put into the University of California and Caltech and Stanford, and all of those investments are paying off in ways that have really come to benefit our state. We rely on this creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurial spirit. And I think we're really proud of it. We want to keep it. We're also worried about our competitiveness. I think we understand our costs are, as I say, our costs are higher, our regulations are higher, our taxes are higher. And we're in this constant push and pull with other states that are trying to steal our businesses. I'm dealing with this right now. I'm working on a big TV film tax credit expansion to help make sure that we keep our competitiveness with TV and film production here. You've seen other states and jurisdictions and countries that are stepping up and really trying to steal a lot of that work. And we've got to offer better incentives. I mean, we know we don't have to match what British Columbia is doing, but we got to be more competitive. The governor's proposed a doubling of our TV film tax credit. That's a really important thing to do, because one of the things that's now starting to happen is that the infrastructure, used to be that people would go off and do these one-off productions. Well, now the infrastructure is starting to really build out in places like Louisiana and Georgia and Vancouver and Toronto. And so now that infrastructure is there. They're having more cinematographers, more people, more grips, more folks who know the process. And so we can't just rely on our infrastructural advantages. We now have to provide more financial incentive. And that's just one example of how the world continues to move at an incredibly fast pace. And we, as a big government with a lot of competing interests, and quite frankly, a lot of poverty too, right? I mean, the state of California has a ton of poverty. People don't, there's a lot of wealth here and a lot of poverty. And so there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time focused on poverty. And that's really appropriate and important. We don't just see that. It's not just the homeless folks, it's also the working poor all over our state. And those are important priorities too. And oftentimes there's a bit of a tension over taxation and social welfare and redistributive policies. And how do we strike that balance to allow for the entrepreneurial innovation and the business growth and the IPOs that have helped to drive our economy and drive our budgets, while also making sure that we're taking care of the least among us. And that's another kind of very difficult policy conundrum.
Last question, and then we're going to get to the audience. So we'll make this our lightning question. You've seen everyone here, including yourself, is an AI user in some form or another. It's just, I couldn't even imagine living without it at this point. It only took, a year or so, and now it's just, it can't go away. What is the government doing in government? Like, what are they doing to embrace that so that they can operate at the same wavelength as the rest of the world and not get behind too fast? And
yeah, probably not enough. I think that's, the GovTech folks are going to be the ones that are going to help to bridge the gap here. How do we utilize AI as effectively as private sector is using it? Of course, a lot of our focus has been on where regulation goes. A lot of people see AI. A lot of our. We talked about Hollywood, right? I mean, our writers and actors see AI as a massive plagiarism scheme. At least aspects of it, right? Where they take their hard work and writing and creative skills and spit it out with no compensation. So there's all those issues. But you're talking more about how do we incorporate AI into government services and interaction. And I know that's something you worked on both when you were working for the Senate and I think you're working on now. The government's slow. And yet you have some more innovative elected officials that are trying to incorporate it into their work. And you're certainly starting to see it filter into the mass systems. I mean, in some respects, AI could be incredibly helpful. If you think about government is the biggest business out there. I mean, we're providing massive services to healthcare and housing and education. I mean, if you think about the expenditures and the databases and using smart AI technology to help smooth all of that work could really be transformative, and yet it's gonna take some really innovative people who are able to both really understand what AI can offer, and also really understand not just what government needs, but how government works. And that's where folks like you and others are gonna be really critical.
Awesome, thank you. That's my last question. We've got about 15 minutes for questions. All right. Well, the front row I think was designated the priority of questions, right? Let's start with.
Well, we'll get to everybody. We'll get to
everyone.
Yeah, Moon should be a state.
Let's start here.
Yeah, that'll be my last question. Your opinions on. Oh, testing 1 2 testing. Okay, we're dialed. Evan, thank you very much. Ben, I really appreciate you coming out here. In the last couple of years, I've written my own voter guides and really tried to understand, what the FOOC is going on, and especially at the state level. So it's awesome to see someone in the flesh. You don't seem like an NPC. You actually seem like you care about these things. And Evan was singing your praises before, so I really appreciate you taking the time to come out. I do have a few questions. Found about this event yesterday, and a few things jumped to my mind that I feel really lucky that I can ask you right now. We have the highest LLC renewal costs in the country, $800 a year. What are we doing about that? California defaulted on a federal loan, a COVID loan. We're one of 5 states in the union that defaults on that loan, and then that loan is now the federal government's coming after California businesses to take money from their payroll. My own business got charged at the end of the year. It's not very much. It's a per employee basis, but if you're running a big shop and you have several employees, that a few $1,000s at the end of the year means you're not buying your kids gifts at the end of the year. So I want to know what happened there. And I'm also the Palisades Reservoir. If you have a couple sentences on why that was empty, yeah. I'm really trying to understand what happened there. And also, finally, we talk a lot about innovation in California. Trying to be an amazing place for the future. And I'm very concerned with some of the AI legislation that thankfully Newsom vetoed. It's one of the good things he's done. He vetoed Anthony Weiner's legislation, which is trying to slow down AI and regulate it. You mentioned you're glad that we're creating all these new things. The regulators can't even keep up with it. But I would love a situation where the regulators were actually good, and if they could keep up with it, it would actually help things. And just, quickly, I would love no regulation at all. We just had China come out with DeepSeek. We're in a hot, cold war right now. Like, the race is on. I want government to, frankly, stay out of it. I think they shouldn't do anything, and I think we need to go full speed ahead. And that's my opinion. I'm curious your thoughts on that. And finally, if you think Moon should be the 50, and finally, if a Moon should be the 51st State of the Union. The Moon, yeah. I'm curious your thoughts on it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You got your work cut out for you there. We'll try to keep these a couple minutes each so we can get to everybody as well. Okay.
We got a lot of questions.
Yeah. Well, the moon, I mean, no one lives there yet, so, but maybe in the future, right? I mean, but it was certainly, yeah, we were there first. That's true. It's still, actually, no one else has been there, except for the Americans. So, but it's been a while. Reservoir, a great example of governmental dysfunction, right? I mean, it was about a $100,000 fix. There was a crack in the reservoir, and it was just one of those many deferred maintenance projects that just didn't get taken care of. There's a big debate as to how much of a difference that would have made. I think it would have made something of a difference, right? I mean, there would have been a little more water up there for sure, but it probably wouldn't have been the magic bullet that some people are claiming. But it is a good example of how projects, there's a lot of deferred maintenance in the public infrastructure, and that's maybe another thing AI can work on. I love your questions about the COVID loans and the LLC. We are in the process of paying back the money. We do worry a lot about the posture of the federal government right now. I think under a normal, even Republican president, there wouldn't be some of the questions that are popping up right now about punishment. But that was, we were in a budget retreat actually yesterday, and one of the topics was paying back the money. And I wasn't aware that they're clawing back businesses' money associated with it. Yeah. So I'm going to look into that. I'm also going to look into that LLC cost, $800. I mean, I think that ought to be, zero. I wonder if, well, I mean, it shouldn't be zero for Amazon, right? I mean, if it was incorporated here, which is probably not.
No, they create a bunch of jobs. Why shouldn't it be? It should be zero for Amazon.
Because there are some administrative costs associated with maintaining the paperwork associated with these corporations. I think I don't want to see it. Should the taxpayer pay? Maybe, right? I mean, but the flip side is, should we make it more reasonable for especially small guys that are just trying to get off the ground when they have a low payroll? I do think so. So I'd actually like to. It's the first time it's ever been brought up to me, quite frankly, and I'd love to look into maybe it can be could be calibrated based on your size of your business or something like that. But I don't personally have a problem with Amazon paying a fee to help pay for the incorporation costs, because otherwise it would be the taxpayers paying for that, and that may not be fair. But your point's well taken. So does that? I'm trying to be quick because I know there's about 5.
Last one was AI.
Oh, AI. Yeah. So I think what we have to do with AI. So the challenge with AI on the regulatory side is we don't want to do anything that I don't want to see us regulate AI in a way that will simply drive the business out of the state. I'm concerned about aspects of AI. I genuinely am. I brought up the issues with with the writers and the actors have been bringing up. And for example, we just passed some legislation that the governor did sign that increased the rights of an actor whose image and likeness is being utilized in AI that was one bill we passed. I was at a music studio not too long ago, and they played some music that was so close to the original music that it really becomes an IP violation from my perspective. And again, I don't want to be such a stickler on IP, but the flip side is these are creative people. I mean, just like I represent a lot of tech people, I also represent a lot of creatives that their whole lives are based on their creative output. And if they write something that's extraordinary or sing something that's extraordinary, and then it just literally gets changed, tweaked by some algorithm, and then all of a sudden they have no compensation associated with it, even though the algorithm is entirely based on their creativity, or at least largely based on their creativity. That about bothers me. So I want to find I'd love to find a balance. I also don't want. I will say throughout this whole conversation, I don't want to see us regulate AI in a way that simply will offshore the work. If we can truly protect California creatives, I'm very interested in that. But if it's about just regulating the AI work here that could just easily pop over to Singapore or Nevada or doing the exact same work, that doesn't help me, because the same policy problems continue, and all we're doing is just kicking those good jobs and good revenue out of the state. And I think you're right. The governor is acutely aware of how important AI has become as a revenue generator for the tech sector, and how incredibly important the tech sector is for the state of California, both our budget and our jobs and our economy. We really follow the NASDAQ very closely from a revenue perspective for us. And so I think that's why you see the reticence. And that's going to ultimately be the debate here. I mean, how do we protect intellectual property and creativity while also not stymieing innovation and all the benefits associated with it?
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, let's go right here, and then we'll jump to the farther back rows.
Okay. Hey, I'm building a mining company here
Okay.
in California, and just to get land,
Like
we had to
Bitcoin?
go to
Or
real
okay.
physical mining.
Real mining.
Yep.
Try to keep the
Oh my
questions
God.
to one,
All right,
if
all right.
possible. Just so
Real
quick
mining. Well, that's
preface.
nice to hear.
Yeah, and we had to get land in Nevada to it just didn't make sense to start doing it here, so we had to go get like 20 acres right off the I-15.
Okay.
So yeah, there's way too much regulation, way too many fees, time. It's just really problematic when it comes to infrastructure, especially land and stuff here, and it's not making it competitive. There's a lot of other things that are great about California, but we got to fix those if we want to keep talent and growth here, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and just to give you another idea, on the toxic waste stuff, our environmental regulations are so strong that we're likely going to be exporting a lot of that toxic waste to Nevada and Arizona, where they have significantly lower environmental standards, including right next to this Indian reservation. I mean, it's pretty ugly stuff. There's been a lot of journalism on this. It's a really tough balance, right? I mean, California also prides itself on its environmental protection, and mining has been a very dangerous and damaging activity. That doesn't mean that there's not ways to do it that's more environmentally responsible. Yeah, of course.
We're offshoring mining to countries and other places that have 10 times the pollutants.
And that's the flip side.
Yeah, it's not.
I think you see that also with oil production.
Critical, yeah.
You see that with oil production too, where we may all, as folks who are concerned about climate change, have a certain degree of antipathy toward the oil industry and want to see a reduction in oil use globally. But your point's well taken. The production of oil within the state of California tends to be a lot cleaner and less.
Solar panels don't grow on trees either.
Right, right. And they also have disposal challenges and all the rest. There is mining in the state, and I mean, I'd love to learn more about your particular circumstances.
You guys actually in El Segundo.
Oh, cool.
With your staffers, so.
Okay, cool. I'd love to learn more about it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes,
All right, let's jump. He was next, and then we'll.
yeah.
Or
Yes,
you
sir.
could pick. You want to pick? You
I'm
pick.
sorry,
No,
I'm
you do
sorry.
the picking.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
there you go.
Yeah. We'll make our way back.
Yeah, hi. I'm wondering about, has there been any talk about Prop 13 and how Prop 13, if I want to buy a building, I'm going to paying 10 times as much each year in tax compared to somebody has the assessed value from the 70s.
Yeah.
And so this puts a huge extra cost on us that doesn't exist. It's sort of like California has this, aristocratic real estate tax with Prop 13, and so it does impinge. You're like, should I be paying 10 times much each year? That's just really unfair.
Right.
And is there any talk in that in terms of like, you can help spur new businesses? We have to pay 10 times as much just to start up. So.
And it's unfair to young families. So traditionally Prop 13, Prop 13, for folks who don't know as much about it, it basically locks in very low property tax rates and increment for when a property is purchased. And, of course, it was passed at a time when home values were skyrocketing, and a lot of people on fixed incomes were basically getting priced out of their homes because of their tax liability, which was pretty ugly. Now, of course, it extended to I think it was passed largely to help residential folks. The biggest windfall has been big corporations, right? I mean, Disneyland is still paying their tax increment from, the 70s, from their assessed value in the 70s, and they're paying a much, much lower rate than either of us are paying. And, it's funny. I mean, I've experienced this in my own family. My parents have had their home since the 70s. I have a much, much more modest home than they do, and yet I'm paying, almost double, triple the tax. So I think, it's been considered the third rail of California politics. Nobody wants to touch it. It's so popular, Prop 13. But like so many things, I think on a lot of things we've been talking about, I've always struck by how lame the conversation about taxes is in general in America. People want more taxes, they want less taxes. From my perspective, it's how you tax, what you tweak, what you incentivize, what you disincentivize. And I would love to see some little tweak, right? A slightly higher increment for those folks that have the reassessment in return for maybe a slightly lower amount for the new assessments. There would be kind of an across the board. That would be a bit of a transfer, and I think a lot of people would kick and scream. But if we keep it modest enough, it would still be meaningful to people like you, but also be something that might be that the folks who are paying a little bit more be more willing to swallow. I think they're locked in at like a 2% annual increase, which is so much lower than inflation. Maybe it could be 2.25, right? In return, we can provide some tax relief elsewhere, or 2.3, something modest, not a massive revolutionary change that would break the bank, but that could allow for more relief along the lines of what you've been describing. That's what I'd love to see. Yeah, sir. I know I'm going to go faster now because we're under time pressure. I think, right? Yeah. Okay. Good. All right.
I have one actual question, which
Yes.
is not a manifesto or a complaint.
Okay.
So there's a direct line between what happened in Southern California, the fires, and suburban sprawl, big-ass SUVs commuting 20, 30 miles each way, and generally ignoring the fact that climate change is real. As we're rebuilding, is there some provision in California to rebuild in a way that doesn't propagate these same mistakes, such that this will happen again?
Yeah. I absolutely agree with the core premise of your question, and I am concerned that there's so much pressure to just get people back on their feet and rebuilding, which I understand completely. I mean, if you lose, I think it's easy for those of us who haven't lost a home to think bigger picture, but these are folks that have lost everything, and they're so anxious to get going again. The flip side is it would be ridiculous for us to just carry on as though this hadn't happened and just repeat the same mistakes of the past. I mean, shame on us if we rebuild in a way that will just lead to a high likelihood of this happening again for the next generation of people who live in those homes. So certainly, I think there should be no compromise on strict fire standards, home hardening, brush, the defensive space. One thing that we find is that it's also, some of it's about a community, right? I mean, community. You can build the most home-hardened home in the neighborhood, and you may save your house. But if all of your neighbors are not engaging in fire-safe practices, you're also still going to be very likely to burn. And so I'm hopeful that So I've been advocating, as we give more flexibility, that we really not that we not compromise at all on fire safety. I also think we should be incentivizing more climate resilient rebuilds. I also think we should treat, I personally think of the person who lost their family home, who's trying to rebuild, differently than a developer who's coming in, buying the home at a discount and trying to just redevelop the area. I treat them differently. I don't think that they shouldn't be getting some streamlining too, but I would think that maybe we should hold them to a somewhat higher standard on some of the issues that you raised. Because the reason why we're so anxious to let people to streamline right now and drop all the regulations is because we're so sympathetic, we're so empathetic to the folks who lost their family homes, and we don't want to put any barriers in the way. But their situation feels different than someone who's trying to profit. I mean, you have Blackstone, BlackRock moving into Altadena, looking to purchase a lot of homes, and that just feels different to me when it comes to regulatory relief. So that I would say, please no compromise, and I'm saying this to my colleagues at the city council and the county, please no compromise on fire safety, and let's incorporate some of the lessons learned. And then also I think we should be looking to incentivize more climate resilient planning and building in general. I tend to wanted to be a little bit more carrot when it comes to a rebuild. I want to be more stick when it comes to new development. I think we should be much more circumspect about building new development in very high fire risk zones. We got to have better planning for water, not just for the homes, but for the firefighting. We got to have ingress and egress. I did a bill on this topic where if you're going to build a new big development out in the very high fire risk zones, you got to have a way in and a way out, two different ways. So you don't have people frying to death in their cars, stuck in a traffic jam like they did in Paradise, where dozens of people literally couldn't get out. They couldn't get out and they burned to death in their cars because there was only one road out of town in the middle of this very high fire risk zone. And so we've got to be much smarter about the way we plan. And then, of course, we also, we're proud of our leadership role in fighting climate change writ large. And quite frankly, I'm personally very worried about the posture of the federal government on this issue, given what a massive challenge it is for our planet. And yet, as you know, California, I think, is going to continue to be an innovator on trying to help drive solutions globally on this massive existential problem. And as they say, if you don't believe in climate change, go ask a firefighter. They will tell you. Even young firefighters will tell you how much worse things have gotten, the basic conditions in the last 10 to 15 years as a result of climate change. Yeah, yes, sir.
Hi, I hate this so many levels. Relatives of mine, my brother-in-law lost their house.
Oh, God, I'm sorry.
I just found out my line producer from my last show lost 3 houses, his daughters, and his granddaughters. We all have those experiences. I'm involved in our neighborhood council. I'm involved in our community council.
In Venice or Palisades?
Well, I'm in the council,
yeah.
but no, in the Palisades.
Yeah.
We all know a lot of people, and I keep hearing about the toxic waste. But if I build houses, if you tear down your house, you move it away. So no one ever speaks to the idea why this is. I get the fire, maybe chemicals, but why is that different than just tearing down a house? For one, two. And I want you to, this is the right way, because I really think you're obviously mean well. You go to KI, you're involved in that. You must have grown up in that area. So then I start to think about why is it that in a way you're speaking toward, well, here's in a way what you can do. We have AI. We can actually look up things. You could build better bills, but I'm not hearing action. I'm hearing about the bureaucracy. I know all about the bureaucracy. I think a lot of people in this room do. What's the call to action? What can we do? What can, why is it toxic? Why can't my brother-in-law and my friends just bring up a private company in, clear it out? Maybe you're doing the infrastructure while we're building houses, building their houses. That's sort of my vague question, but it's sort of generalized.
Yeah. So the difference, of course, is the incineration, right? So when you burn, when you're demolishing a house, you're basically taking out the dangerous items and then demolishing the rest. In this case, our houses are chock full of electronics, of refrigerants, batteries that are now just literally up in smoke and in the air and all over the ash. In fact, 2 days after the fire, the LA basin had lead levels in the air that were 100 times normal levels. Chlorine levels that were 60 times above normal levels. That was for the whole basin. Imagine what it was like right next to the fire zone. And that's all in the ash there right now. So there's a lot of stuff. I'm working on a bill on household hazardous waste. There's a lot of stuff in our homes that's actually dangerous stuff. It's not dangerous if it's inert, if it's in a container on the shelf and you use it carefully. But if you literally light it on fire and then breathe in the fumes and have the ash strewn about in your house, it's very dangerous. It's very toxic. So now they are letting in contractors now. They needed to there were down power lines, there was open gas lines, there was water mains that were shooting up. I went there a couple days after the fire, and the place was crawling with utility workers just trying to shut everything off. So they weren't ready to let general folks come in and start working on their properties. That just wasn't a possibility because it was so much chaos and danger. But now they're letting contractors in. The EPA's already started the toxics cleanup, and it just takes a while. I think if you get in there, you'll see. It's hard to describe what a massive undertaking it is if you haven't had a chance to walk the streets there, which most people haven't, right? Because it's dangerous and we can't let everyone in there. And then of course we had looters and all sorts of other things happening. In terms of the call to action, are you more talking about the Palisades or are you talking about AI, or just or both? A little bit of both. The call. Well, I guess, I mean, I've been lots of calls to action on the Palisades. We've been raising funds. We've been getting donations. We've been hosting town halls. We've been trying to pump out as much information as we can and trying to engage as many people as we can. I'm certainly, if there are people that want to talk specifically about how to help, yeah.
I can narrow that a little bit. So like one of the comments I called Oliver as example, instead of bringing clothes necessarily, and it came back again. So one of the calls I talked to the battalion chiefs who said it's better to give us, credit gift cards to Ralph's because we have to buy our own food.
Right.
That's better than a bunch of cakes and clothes showing up at our fire station won't find their buyer.
Right.
It has longer term effect. And then I extended that, send cards to your friends because, and I came back with one of my friends in Acton who said, that's actually great because I don't even know if I need underwear this morning.
Right.
So that would be kind of a call to action. A house that's burned down, you just helped explain why you can't just get in there with your own contractor. Those are, so what would be the call to action where you can help them? That's kind of on AI is how can we use AI? We're in a localized community, whether it's Los Angeles or Palisades or Acton. It's not Acton, it's like how can we use the things that this group is about, aside from building filtration systems in the schools? What can we do to actually do everyone in here do a little bit of something as opposed to policy?
With AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's ultimately about. I mean, I'd want to sit down. I'm not super familiar with everybody's work here, and I'd love to kind of get more of an understanding. And I think if we had deeper conversations, we could probably get into ways that you could be helpful. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's 20 different products here, some of which would be much more helpful than others for the work that we do. So I need to get more into the details, I guess, of what's on offer here. And I'm happy to engage. I mean, I'd love to, we could get a little group together and have a chat about it. And we'd love brainstorm with you. Yeah. So I guess my call to action, I guess, is a call for conversation so we can talk about how we can work together. I'd love to hear the ideas that are on the table. And I didn't mean to be too much of a Debbie Downer about the bureaucracy, but I've been working in it for a while and it has gotten me down a little bit. Yeah. So I'm going to take a couple more questions. I know we got to wrap up, but I want to make sure we at least hear from everybody. But I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to, if you want to get a little group together, let's get together in a couple of weeks and have a little roundtable and just talk about what sort of, just try to bridge some of these gaps and brainstorm together about some of the products that are on offer here that could help.
Thank you. And I meant to say, by the way, Evan, thank you for being here. I forgot to say that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. This is fun. Yeah, sir. And then we'll go over here. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for taking these questions. So for companies that are looking to, eventually contract with, let's say, California or like the government, would you say, what do you think is the best means to find out if government needs it? Yeah. And, oftentimes it may be related to a particular, let's say, department that would need it, but they, haven't even told procurement about it, right? So there's a little bit of a mapping here. If you have any suggestions as to how we can probably even get anyone who's starting from step 0, like what they should probably be doing.
Okay, that's a good question. And then what's the question over here?
I'm just wondering how you begin a public-private partnership.
Yeah, and there's similar questions actually. That's great. Okay, any final questions? And I'll answer these two, and then we'll wrap up. Oh yes, yeah.
I had a question. What kind of support is being offered to the workers who, in general, offer services to these burned down areas, like house cleaners or yard workers, things like that?
Yeah. There's unemployment support. Obviously, the workers that are going to going in there are going to be getting both compensated, and also there's a lot of protective equipment that we're giving them. But that's that's certainly been a big. Most of them right now we're assisting with getting on EDD, unemployment insurance, to get some kind of backup support. So that's the primary form of support right now. I know a lot of them are, there's some different nonprofit organizations that are out there trying to help people find new job placements, and but it's another one of the many problems that we have, and quite frankly, it's probably inadequate. But there is the unemployment system that's there to help. These are the questions that you're asking about how to work with the government. It's not an area, quite frankly. So I've been on the legislative side, right? The work, the actual work is really in the bureaucracy, right? It's in the administration. It's in these agencies, And I'm now actually a budget sub chair. So people starting to come to me to talk about procurement in a way that I was always working on bills, which is about policy ideas. So I'm getting deeper into this. I will have probably a much better understanding, I think, in about a year to be able to answer your question. Because I don't know that I understand the system well enough to give you a really good answer. I have found that as I've tried to hook up entrepreneurs, it's generally been a frustrating experience for me, because sometimes I'll have friends that are doing really cool stuff that I think are really cool, and they just kind of run into the wall. There have been a couple examples that have worked out. What I've found is I guess what I would say is, especially if you're small, if you're big, there's a different story. You hook into a system that is oftentimes professionalized. They've got a system for government contracts and for grants and engagement, procurement. They hire lobbyists. They know how to work the system. If you're small, I would encourage you to start small. So there are lots of we started out our conversation with the civics lesson about the decentralization, which actually could be your friend in this respect. Because we're so decentralized, there are lots of different people at many different levels of government making decisions. The school district may be someone you're not thinking about reaching out to, but they've lost several schools up there, and they've got massive problems and challenges, and they've got their whole procurement system. Not just LAUSD, but also smaller schools, including schools like Santa Monica, which may not have had damage done to any of their schools, but there's a massive influx of new students, and there's various challenges associated with air quality because they're so close to the fire zone. So thinking about instead of just trying to go directly to Governor Newsom, I got the best product and you're going to win, we're going to get in front of you and you're going to buy us, thinking about other levels of government, thinking more local, getting through to a city council. I mean, Tracy Park, who represents this area, is a very engaged person. She's proactive. She listens to people. She's not a bureaucrat. I would think that if you come forward with a product that could be help with the situation, she represents Venice. She also the district includes the Palisades. I would think that you should have her come in. By the way, I think it'd be fun. Okay, all right, great. See, good idea. Yeah, Tracy's great. So my point is, I think she would be an example, and of course, she's part of a big bureaucracy too. The city of LA is a big bureaucracy, but she's the kind of person that might be inclined to help navigate the LA bureaucracy. And she's got more influence within the LA bureaucracy than I have within the state bureaucracy, because she's only one of 15 council members. And she's got particular influence over the cleanup effort associated with the Palisades. So I would just say, and then of course you got to know the process, right? There are people that work on government procurement, and I would think that having someone who's got experience with government RFP processes is helpful. Having someone who maybe have worked for one of these departments before. There are companies that consult on this work. And again, I wouldn't ask you you shouldn't break the bank. You shouldn't spend all your money on this. But I think it's worth having some expertise. Just like you would never enter into a serious contract without having a lawyer. It's good to have someone who knows the process, who can help you walk through it and help strengthen your pitch to the government. And so I would but again, it's about being proactive. It's about people. It's about not being too discouraged by the kind of bureaucracy. So if one fire station turns you down, go to the next one, and just and try to see if you've got ins. Work through someone like Tracy. Find people like Tracy within the system that are a little bit more entrepreneurial and a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more willing to take risks and listen to different kinds of ideas. Who's kind of an anti-bureaucratic, she chafes at the bureaucracy. And that's a good thing for you, right? Because you want someone like that who might believe in what you're trying to do and could help you. And I would encourage you to engage with her in her office and her staff if you're trying to help. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. I was certainly, great questions. And quite frankly, I appreciate this because, I'm literally in my 11th year. It's really ridiculous. I can't believe I've been doing this long. You've asked me questions that I've, some questions that I've never gotten before. Usually I come to a town hall, I've heard them all before in a new version. And quite frankly, it's both, it kind of gets back to the comments I was making before. Shame on all of us, I guess, right? We politicians need to hear more from your voices and not just the voices of big business. and you need to engage more with politicians, right? So I really appreciate this conversation. I hope we have further dialogue to talk about ways that AI can be helpful with government. I'd love to brainstorm with you guys. Maybe we can bring on a couple more innovative thought leaders in the, on the government side who can help maybe with a little bit more experience in the procurement process. And let's talk about it. I'd love to help harness some of the energy that I sense in this room to help solve these big problems. And in the end of the day, it's so easy to just get discouraged by the faceless bureaucracy. And it's ultimately my job to help push through that a little bit and make the system work a little better. And so I welcome that conversation, and I hope we have it soon. And at the end of the day, it's about helping our fellow Californians and make our state a better place to live. And if you've got products that are going to help with that, I'm all ears, and I want to help facilitate it. So thank you for the discussion. Look forward to our future discussions, and appreciate everyone's attention.
Thank you for joining. Like everything Ben said, I don't think I have too many closing words here. You guys are great, and we are the entrepreneurs that actually do the things that make the world creative, better, innovative. So keep doing it, and we'll see you here next time, and we'll try to make that session happen.